Possible talks to mediate an end to Russia's war against Ukraine are moving quickly, with Russian and U.S. officials meeting in Saudi Arabia today, and U.S. General Keith Kellogg arriving in Kyiv Wednesday for 3 days of meetings with President Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials. But European leaders are worried the Trump administration does not have Ukraine's best interests in mind. Foreign correspondent Tom Sophie Burge now reports from Estonia and Poland, where U.S. troops and weaponry still act as a deterrence against Russian aggression.
Along a vast front line, and after nearly 3 years, Russia's invasion of Ukraine is raging on. Even on Monday night, with peace talks about to get underway, smoke rising over Kyiv's skyline after Russia launched one of its largest ever drone attacks since the war began. Now President Trump is pressing on with his plan to try and end the fighting. In Riyadh, Saudi Arabia today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio sitting across from Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the pair agreeing to appoint ambassadors to Washington, D.C. and Moscow as a first step.
In order to bring an end to any conflict, there has to be concessions made by all sides. We're not going to predetermine what those are.
But Lavrov ruling out any peacekeeping force of European troops on Ukrainian soil to police a hypothetical ceasefire. Russia seeking to further undermine Ukraine's sovereignty, claiming more Ukrainian land, and Moscow demanding new elections in Ukraine. Ukrainian officials say Moscow seeks a pro-Russian puppet government in Kyiv. Trump himself speaking on the phone with Ukrainian President Zelensky last week, but only after a 90-minute call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Kremlin-controlled TV calling the Trump-Putin call an historic event. It signals a dramatic turnaround in US-Russian relations, with Trump saying the two leaders agreed to work together very closely and suggesting Putin could even be invited to the US.
I'll be dealing with President Putin largely on the phone, and we ultimately expect to meet. In fact, we expect that he'll come here and I'll go there.
Trump's apparent admiration for Putin sparking concern in Europe. European leaders gathering Monday in Paris for an emergency meeting. The European Union's top diplomat earlier warning against a, quote, quick and dirty deal, which could appease Putin, arguing Ukraine must be an equal partner at the table.
Hello, everybody. It is clear that any deal behind our backs will not work. Any agreement will need also Ukraine and Europe being part of it, and this is clear that appeasement also always fails.
Vice President Vance going face-to-face with Ukrainian President Zelensky at a key security conference in Munich Friday. Ukraine playing President Trump's transactional game, putting an offer on the table linked to American access to Ukrainian minerals and other resources. Part of the talks between the US and Ukraine amid the tight security here in Munich is about a trade-off. How would America benefit if it continues to back Ukraine? But Trump officials indicating the US role in supporting Ukraine will be reduced, and Europe will have to plug the gap and step up more on the broader defense of Europe.
I think Europe is looking essentially at a post-American future for maintaining its security. I think the Trump administration very much wants to shift the burden of responsibility for European security to Europeans.
We're on a military training exercise right up in northeastern Europe in the small Baltic nation of Estonia. Here, battle groups, including American troops, wargame it out.
Our mission here is to deter any aggressors within the eastern NATO flank.
This eastern flank is where European NATO nations meet Russia. And these exercises are about increasing the readiness of NATO's joint task force if the threat from Moscow becomes real here. Well, this is the NATO deterrent. British, French, Estonian and US boots on the ground. And all of this happening just a short distance from Estonia's eastern border with Russia. Trump's new defense secretary last week on his first foreign trip to Europe, suggesting European and non-European troops could be used as a non-NATO peacekeeping mission in Ukraine to police a potential ceasefire. But Pete Hegseth saying there'll be no US boots on the ground, and Ukraine must give up on land taken by Russia over the past decade.
We want, like you, a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. But we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective.
But even before formal peace talks between Ukraine and Russia get going, top officials in Estonia are sounding the alarm.
Ukraine is not today in the position to start negotiations, that they need to have the stronger position, because when you're going to the negotiations from the weak position, then Russia will use it.
We truly believe that if Russia is winning in Ukraine, then Russia might have next goals ahead, and one might be in this region to weaken the West, to divide NATO countries.
And on America's role in guaranteeing security in Europe, the Trump administration saying European nations should do more and pay more for their own collective defense.
And that's why our message is so stark to our European allies. Now is the time to invest, because you can't make an assumption that America's presence will last forever.
The US's central role within NATO and in defending Europe is well illustrated inside this highly sensitive base in northern Poland. ABC News given rare access to the most sophisticated ballistic missile defense system anywhere in Europe.
Is it a game changer, the system, for Europe?
It is very much a game changer, because, again, an adversary has to be able to contend with the fact that this site exists.
It's called an Aegis Ashore, and it's operated by its American crew 24/7.
We're inside one of 3 of the base's launch sites, and inside these giant casings are 8 interceptor missiles, ready, if needs be, to be fired up into orbit to take out a ballistic missile threat.
Eastern European nations like Poland and the Baltics are already ramping up their spending on defense, even embracing an ambitious target suggested by President Trump of 5% of their GDP, way higher than what the US proportionally spends.
We have this understanding that we need to do more, because from the defense point of view, it's much cheaper to spend 5% during the peacetime comparing to 30% of your GDP during the wartime.
But at NATO last week, a dramatic admission over the scale of the challenge. The alliance's Secretary General saying Russia currently produces more ammunition in 3 months than the entire production of NATO countries, including the US, in over a year. Analysts say Trump's goal of reducing the American military footprint in Europe is valid, but warn it won't be easy to achieve, and there are risks.
I think most Americans would say that it's past time that Europe take responsibility for its own defense. But I think if there's an assumption that the United States can simply pull out and Europe can immediately fill the void, I think that's where could put Europe in a very dangerous position.
A rather precarious position. Our thanks to Tom Soufi Burridge.